Welcome everybody to today's IES webinar. With emerging science, technology and regulation, jobs in the environment sector are never static. This webinar series, A Day in the Life, is going to be sharing stories from environmental professionals about how work has evolved and how it may change in the future. Today, we're joined by Kripa Dwarakanath, a technical director working at GHD. Kripa has a first degree in architecture and further specialized into environmental planning. She has over 19 years of postgraduate consultancy experience in sustainability strategy advisory, including the last 10 years in climate change mitigation in the development planning policy, water, aviation, built environment, and rail infrastructure sectors. Kripa worked in India during the early part of her career and has been practicing in the UK since 2005. In today's webinar, Kripa will share her perspectives on the nature of her work in the sustainability sector, what it was like in the past, and how it may look in the future. This webinar is part of the fifth theme of our year-long Future of ES23 Horizon Scanning and Foresight project, that theme being the job, where we're looking at several key environmental specialisms and asking what the job was like in the past, what it's like now, and how it might look like in the future. Throughout the year, we've been bringing together interdisciplinary perspectives on horizon scanning from across the environment. The work is supporting the sector to manage risk, to plan ahead, and to work towards a better future for the environment achieved through transformative change. In just over a month, we'll be publishing a vision statement on the future of the environmental sciences to bring all of that work together, so keep an eye out for more information soon. Focusing on the matter at hand, as always, there'll be a chance for your questions at the end of the presentation, so please do submit those in the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen at any point during the presentation, and then I'll ask those to Kripa on your behalf a little bit later on. Thank you for logging in, but for now, I'm going to hand over to Kripa. So Kripa, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Joseph. For the introduction and thank you for inviting me to talk on this and also to be part of the ES23 Horizon Scanning project. It did help in reflecting on upon what was it that I've been doing it for quite some time, so it was a useful exercise for myself. So yeah, to introduce myself, good afternoon. Friends and colleagues, I'm Kripa Dwarakanath, Service Line Leader for Sustainability and Resilience in the Europe and Middle East region at GHD. GHD, as a company, we've been in business for more than 90 years now. Started in Australia, and it's still it's a big firm out there in Australia. And now we've branched out, have established digital advisory and core technical businesses around the globe, including North America, of course, Australia. We're delivering, or still counting, delivering projects around in 135 countries. And so on. So by now, you might have established that I'm actually not talking about the GHD hair straightener company, because we are known for providing infrastructure and engineering services, consultancy services. Now, my particular division, we work with an advisory who provide ESG and sustainability and resilience services as well. So what we do is it's a consultancy, and we do provide multidisciplinary innovative solutions to wicked problems that is associated with development. Our approach, which I will touch upon as well in my presentation, is non-traditional. It's not like the siloed way of looking at things, and hence we call our approach 3 approaches: future energy, future water, and future communities, where that whole interdisciplinarity is weaved in the way we look at and ensure opportunity, the way we talk to people, and the way we talk to clients as well as in industry. So before I dive into what my day in the life was, which was in like 10 years and then 5 years before now, as well as what could it be in the future, I thought I'll share a bit of my story of where I started and the types of things that I absorbed, and the skills that I picked up, which has helped, probably at least myself, just helped in shaping this, and also in that journey, how this whole topic around sustainability and sustainable development has changed, as well as a profession, how it has evolved. So those are the reflections I thought I'll share with you. So yes, as a practitioner, I've been a practitioner in the environmental planning and sustainability area for almost 21 years now, if I did include my early stages working in India. And that was varied as well. Did environmental assessments, for example, or worked on social assessments, and the types of projects were both research as well as engaging with communities. I'm talking about grassroots. So all that experience, it was kind of a mishmash at that point in time, but all that experience, all those encounters, all those various things that came along was quite helpful to it was just like those wires were getting connected in my brain, which was just quite good at that point. And that was when I moved to the UK to do my master's degree in environmental policy planning. But that was the time and probably defined why and how I should get into this whole sustainability sector, or the business of sustainability, if you like, because there was where I was introduced to the topic of sustainable development properly, and to the concepts around sustainability, the need to consider social and environmental themes in tandem. And that it was at the same time that the EU directive on sustainability appraisals and strategic environment assessments came along. I know there are a lot of professionals who have their views around SCA and SA and so on, that it's long-winded and this and that. But as a person who has practiced or used, I've benefited a lot through that, because it's the whole framework setting, it's outcomes based, and the whole process gives us an opportunity to think through an interdisciplinary lens. And I think that has set my career, and it was a perfect start for my career in the UK. And since then, of course, I've worked on quite a lot of planning policies, developed planning policies for local authorities, in a hardcore SCA/SA type work, but it was the framework setting experience and the skills that set my career up. And I used those skills in various contexts, for example, in the transport sector and so on and so forth. And that's how it's been for quite some time. I'm still working on that now. So it gave me the skills to take a holistic view on social, environmental, economic factors, and trained me on the importance of materiality and how taking outcomes-based approach can shape our decision making and therefore actions. And instead of taking only a risk-based or a impacts-based approach. So that was that's just I thought it'll be useful to give that background before I start talking about what it has been in the last few years. I'm just going to share my screen. Give me a minute. Right. So, what was it like about 7 or 10 years ago? I thought I'll just reflect on what the demand as in drivers when it comes to this whole business around sustainability. When I say business, it means the concept and the understanding and so on. So in terms of demand, we're talking about between pre-Paris Agreement and when Paris Agreement happened. In general, many people, not everybody, did acknowledge there was this acknowledgement around climate change impacts and the need to mitigate and so on and so forth. But sustainability as a topic itself, it was still at that point linked to environmental topics only. And I still remember those days when we had to write bids where, oh, can you provide a blurb around sustainability? It was more like an add-on sort of. I mean, of course, as an organization at that point when I was pre-GHD where I was working, our engineers and everybody were we wanted to push sustainability, but the clients were not asking for it. So hence we had to be provided in more like a value add service than mainstream. And but I also remember there was a project. It was a major project in London Underground one. Standard, you have engineering and proper like you did design and concept design and detail design and everything. So we were in the concept design stage, and as good consultants, because we wanted to genuinely advance this whole sustainability piece principles in practice. We would take into the client. This whole idea was taken to the client, and a part of the client team, they were engaged in everything, but the project manager was not necessarily fully engaged, and they saw it more like a way to bill, to get more fee, because that's what consultants do, is what many clients think. And then we still went on with it, and then I said, okay, let's have an opportunity to sit down with the client's team, especially the project manager being there. And I was keen to bring this whole interdisciplinary as well as inter-party, like cross-party conversation. So the client team was there, and the design team, as well as obviously all our engineers, the key engineers, MEP and structural and so on and so forth. They were all together, and that workshop went very well, and it demonstrated what we are trying to do. It was genuinely not just giving all those jargons and talking about this whole thing around sustainability as at that point was what was in existence. It was instead genuinely thinking through what those principles mean in practice and how that can be practically incorporated within that project. But after attending that workshop, we were very pleased to hear that this was the work stream, the sustainability work stream report was the first one to be signed off and paid, which was like, what happened there? And then I reflected quite a lot on that, and then thought probably because there is this perception that was at that point in the with quite a lot of people outside uh, the sustainability professionals circle, that it is more like money making, or it's more like jargony, just a bit of all those words that you can think of. So that was quite a change, and it kind of helps understand that. And slowly, not just myself, there were so many other organizations, other people in other organizations as well. They were doing exactly the same thing, which was quite helpful. But equally helpful was other things like, of course, the industry itself, ICE, IES, Syria, and several organizations took the lead in pushing that whole climate and sustainability agenda into practice. And so did various other organizations like BREEAM, for example, BRE, for example, through BREEAM and SQL and so on. So it set the framework. Again, it was not just words. It was around what could be the tools and frameworks to help us think through this whole process. And that was quite useful. And it helped as well as a sustainability consultant, a sustainability professional to engage with people with non-sustainability audience. So that was how it was about. I'm talking about till 2015, 2016 time. And the funding was at that time actually was not allocated. If the funding usually was not, that was a typo, sorry. The funding was not always readily available. It was, when I'm talking about funding, I'm talking about whether organization and businesses asked for sustainability and there was a particular budget allocated to this. No, not necessarily always the case, but it changed over time. So as I said, the status or level of importance that was attached, it was more like a value add sort of a thing. But personally, the last thing I wanted to talk about was skills, again, reflecting on, and this is only my skills that I might have gained or I might have developed at that point in time. But happy to talk about the wider, with the knowledge I have about the wider industry. But thinking about my own skills, I think at that time was when I got invested more time and energy in this whole interdisciplinary engagement. What are the to find out about other disciplines and see what are the things that relate, and understand a bit more about other disciplines to then relate it back to our sustainability principles and then see the connection. So quite a lot of time and efforts in that interdisciplinary thinking in interdisciplinary engagements, as well as in this whole materiality assessments and framework setting, which was quite key, because you don't want to do everything under the banner of sustainability, because there are 17 UN SDGs. We can't do all of them, so we have to be very specific about what is possible in that context of the program or the project or the organization and so on. So that was that 7 to 10 years ago. Moving forward, sorry, next slide, please. Thank you. Which is, what has it been like in the last 3 to 4 years? And I'm talking about current now. There's a market change in, we no longer have to justify that sustainability, the thinking around sustainability is needed, because a number of things has changed. International pressure, for example, national commitments around net zero and so on, as well as many other things. Environmental activism, Greta Thunberg, and a number of other things as well as most importantly, the financial sector's involvement, which means that this whole requirement around non-financial disclosures is so that the businesses have started taking note. And they are now, well, more than that, actually, they're now like left, right, center pushing for, asking for ESG and sustainability and resilience, climate change related queries, and how they can integrate this thinking in their business. But as topics in particular, net zero, net zero, net zero, net zero everywhere. And then to some extent, equality, diversity, and inclusion as a topic. Circular economy more, again, it started, it's working in the background, but it's not as popular or as central as net zero. But those are the, as well as social value and nature-based solutions. Those are the sorts of topics that's now it's exploded the demand for sustainability professionals, and it is a great time to be in this space for now. But there are still some gaps to fill. For example, still there is some way to go before like to take a systems approach or a holistic approach, because the risk is, could these topics actually then push everyone into silo thinking as well? So because net zero, circular economy, and nature-based solutions, diversity and inclusion, they're all linked. They're not separate topics. So I wish there was a bit more focus on that as well. Yeah, and too much focus on carbon than nature. But that's the fundamental thing that we are trying to save or trying to protect. So, but I'm not suggesting that one is bigger than the other. But what it is the need to link them up. Is there needs to be some more work to be done. And it's the same, I would say, for inclusive design or inclusion. Again, thinking about inclusion, social inclusion, thinking about people who might be affected because of a development, not necessarily always negatively, it could be positive as well. And at the moment, there is a whole lot of EDI conversation, but it's limited to organization EDI. I would like to see more of that seep into projects and decision making. So yes, as I said, it's a great time to be as a practitioner, to be able to learn from, participate, contribute, and so on. And a client's demand as well as change. It's actually evolving. It's like changing by the day. The types of questions the types of requests we are getting from them, and the discussions that we could be having with our clients as well as organizations. It's amazing. So and there's dedicated fund as well and support. So that's changed as well. So the level of importance it's now become mainstream. Apparently last year in 2022, if I remember this correctly, if I'd seen in the World Economic Forum, one of the reports, 2 topics that were mainstream last year, digital transformation, sustainability. So from what it was value add 10 years ago, now it's become mainstream, which is great. again, as I said, there's more to go at an organization level and at a government level. There's a lot of funding that's been allocated, and they all want to understand the risks that's relating to their businesses, for example, climate change risks and so on, as well as develop mitigation measures, or to design solutions that's nature-based solutions and so on. Those sorts of questions or those sorts of requests are things that we're seeing now. But the question to ask is, what is it for? Is it to identify strategies and only regulatory, to comply with regulatory requirements, or is it to push for actions, to develop tangible actions? What does that allocation of funding is towards? Is something I would like to think, and I would like to constantly ask. And also, there's one thing which I already touched upon, is if funding could be disproportionately allocated, for example, more towards net zero, not necessarily towards other sustainability topics, which again, it tips the balance. So those are the sorts of little details, well, which I would genuinely like to see that it changes. Yeah, so that's in terms of practice. But reflecting again on my own skills, this is a space, as in with every other sector, which is why I had my images on the right. It's just to reflect on how we were from compact disk, or those stages 10 years ago, now cloud computing, and the next one, what I'm going to talk about. So it changes, and that's what, in terms of skill sets as well, and what we learn, and how we absorb things around us. Also, we need to constantly update ourselves. So if reflecting on what I might have gained, it's more around inclusive design. That's strengthened a lot in the last 3 to 4 years. Carbon reporting, a bit more into details around circular economy. Those are the sorts, like the topics as such. But ideally, I would like to add, I know I'm a bit late on this one, but like to add digital analytics like Power BI or other things. A bit of visual thinking would be coding. It's wishful thinking, but I think it's important that we understand, at least have those basic tools, or the workings of it, because of course I do have a team that helps, and they're pretty good with Power BI and all that, but it's still useful to have that skill set, to be a bit updated on the digital side of things. That's my reflection on about what it is now. If you go move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, so as I was reflecting again on not reflecting, I was thinking what it could be in the next 5 years. It's a bit hard, but I've tried my best. I'm again happy to talk and discuss. The image on the left, like from cloud computing, we're already moved into the AI space and so on. Who knows? And I know there's going to be a lot of intervention or this interaction with artificial intelligence. Don't ask me how much, because I'm yet to explore or find out a bit more. But I personally speaking, that probably is this one of the things outside this core topics around sustainability. It would be a skill set to think about, or at least understand how this whole thing works. But in essence, as I alluded to in my previous slide, in terms of what the demand could be, what the drivers could be in this whole sustainability space, purely thinking, personally think it could be around value chain. So at the moment, the focus is more around organization, businesses, their own impacts, right? So, and again, I'm relating it to the reporting, like the non-financial reporting side of things, which pretty much quite a lot, to an extent, drives a lot of these sustainability interventions. But because of the new corporate social reporting directive, like the ESRS standard and the requirements, which is looking to push towards the value chain, I would I'd be very surprised that we won't move into that space. Like the whole thinking around sustainability and everything moves to beyond organization to the value chain, to the supply chain, and so on. So that's one thing I I think it might happen in the next 1 or 2 years, actually, not necessarily in the 5 years. But what ideally I would like to see is systems thinking. And there was IES ran a webinar last week around polycrisis, where this whole conversation around systems thinking and polycrisis came about. And I think it's time we put it together, because otherwise we'll just get into another siloed way of thinking. And it's time we think about actions, because we've spent the last 10 years talking about it, developing tools and frameworks, quite a lot of reporting requirements, blah blah blah. Get on with it. Actions, actions, and actions is probably and everything, that's the funding as well. Everything I think should be linked to actions, because cost of living crisis is real. So there are competing needs. So it's very important how we spend every penny. And that has to have tangible outcomes, or there has to have outcomes that's thought through in the process of decision making. And I would expect funding will be more, or a budget allocation will be thinking along those lines more. And it better think about systems thinking as well, systems approach. In terms of status, I don't expect it to change from mainstream. It'll remain as mainstream. Personally, I would like to update a bit more myself about, or understand a bit more about this nature-related risks and nature-based solutions. And find out what is this artificial intelligence thing, what is it going to do to our jobs, to our lives, and so on. How is it going to change, if anything? As well as could we train those bots, for example, to do some scenarios for us? Could we use it more effectively and efficiently? Could be the sorts of, those could be jobs for the future in the sustainability industry. Who knows? But those are just like my own thoughts. Who knows? It might happen, it might not happen. It's just an idea there. With that one, I'm going to stop, because I think I've spoken enough about myself. And open to questions if you had any.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Kripa. Thank you for such a great webinar. I think it was a really good overview. And in particular, I think that interdisciplinarity lens is really crucial. So particularly all around this sustainable development conversation, where both of them really touch on so many different specialisms. So it's great to hear that GHD takes that perspective. And then in that context, I think you did a really good job of taking us through how those drivers and demand have taken us on this journey towards mainstreaming. And I think you can see that not only could that lead to, but hopefully it will lead to exactly what you've said at the end there, that value chain perspective, those system thinking perspectives. And I know that Nick, who gave that webinar on polycrisis last week, is in the audience, so I'm sure he'll appreciate the shout out to that one. But like you say, I think we've got a few interesting questions potentially. So let's hop right in. Attendees, if you do have any further questions, please continue to pop those in the Q&A box. I think in the first instance, though, Kripa, I'll take the chair's prerogative maybe and ask you a question, because throughout that you highlighted how your skills have changed, and you've given us some interesting insights into how those skills might shape the sector. But I know that you did flag up as we went that you might have some broader insights on what skills you think are going to be most important for the future of environmental science more broadly. And I wonder if you might start us off on that skills related point.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you. My reference, if you like, was around the UK government's Green Jobs Task Force. So I was going through a few listings there. It was quite interesting because, I mean, of course, they'd looked at more current apprentice programs. And it related to how, for example, let's say electrical technicians and so on, how it can be related to net zero, how it might be related to circular economy. So there was that concept based classification. And that is a great place to start. And it's not just apprentice. I mean, it's with any other degree or any other course. Is once that mapping is done, that's a great place, because you don't want to take away the core. Let's say if you're training to be an electrical engineer or training to be an electrician, not that both are the same, but just putting them in the same, the same space. So the core and the fundamental side of things remain, but if they are at that, if they are being taught right from the beginning, how that relates to how they could be thinking about not everything around in the world, like not all the 17 UN SDGs, but the things that could relate to their the impact that what they might have in terms of, let's say, materials, for example, energy reduction, those concepts. That would be super good. And that's probably that mapping exercise. I must admit, I haven't come across any other mapping exercise other than the one that I saw yesterday on the task force. But there might be some. Even if it doesn't exist, it might be still a worthwhile exercise as an individual too, because it is possible. You know your field very well, and you know what are the other things that it could be affecting direct. But the most important thing is to think through what could be the indirect effects, what could be the indirect impacts, what could be the unintended consequences of the actions that they take, of the materials that they might be using, and so on and so forth. So a bit of introspection also would help, I think. Yeah, so I hope that helps in because interdisciplinarity is not, it's very hard, because I have sat through some IAS interviews as well, where like core geotechnical, and then we can't expect them to do, like, for example, carbon accounting. That's not what we're talking about. So within that area, what are the other topics, and then be more proactive in talking to people. Interdisciplinarity or interdisciplinary thinking is all about talking to other disciplines and figuring out where the commonalities exist. Yeah, so that's my take, and that's how I have grown. So I hope that helps.
No, that definitely helps, and I think it's a good point you made in there about technical education and apprenticeships. It's definitely fair, but I do take the challenge of balancing those technical skills with this sort of broader portfolio of sustainability skills. And I suppose that you're right that interdisciplinary working is part of the solution to that, which is that you can sort of work with others who have those other skills that you might not have access to. And given you mentioned your experience in that there, I wonder if you might share some advice on how you build those links, how you identify those commonalities or those areas for other environmental experts who might be looking to work with different disciplines. So put simply, I wonder if you have any advice for those looking to get into a bit more interdisciplinarity.
It's pretty much, it's related to what could be the advice. I'm just thinking through. It's that whole mapping exercise, I think, will help either in your own head or on a sheet of paper, but guided by, take advantage of the tools and frameworks that exist. Like UNSDG is a very simple, well, not simple. It's a straightforward one that you can pick up on, but there are so many frameworks. A BREEAM one, for example, it depends on your sector as well. It has to be sector specific. So there are a number of frameworks that exist. So that will be my starting point. Take some a well-regarded one though, but that's fundamental, because there are so many frameworks and tools floating around as well. So it's important that you pick from a credible source like a UN and so on, and then think it through, do the mapping exercise. That might be yeah, because you know yourself very well. All that you need to know is what are the wider sustainability topics that you probably don't know about, and those frameworks will be very helpful.
That's a very good point. The knowing what we don't know is always the first step into systems thinking and systems approaches, isn't it? So that's a great point. And I suppose the question that comes naturally from that is, I mean, sustainability is such a broad field in terms of the roles that are involved. You've got all the way from ESG to the SDGs, and then people all the way working into that sort of planning space. There's a very big diversity of roles in sustainability at the moment. I suppose my question would be, are there any other jobs or roles in the sector that you think are particularly interesting, maybe outside your own experiences?
Um, there are plenty of roles. I'm trying to pick what's fascinating or what's I would have liked to. Obviously gone down a particular path, and I know my limitations in terms of what I can absorb or the things. But the wider one, to me, it's the digital space. And I see like gaming, for example, quite a lot. I mean, my son quite a lot into not gaming exactly. He's not that old yet, but I'm sure he will get into that. So it's new ways of thinking. It's new ways of, and that's what I alluded to with artificial intelligence and training bots as well. So if you need to understand a bit more about, how these things work and how you can train them and so on. But there's so many questions, even within the ESG space, sustainability space. When we have to work with clients, for example, they have like we're talking about 600 sites globally, okay, and each of them will have their own interaction with the environment to bring all that information together. It's not just about reporting. That's now ongoing. But what I'm talking about is actions. In order to develop those actions, we'll have to think through a lot of scenarios, right? Who knows? These bots could be trained to the scenarios, right? But to do that, I need to know how to train the bots. So yeah, there could be new ways in which we could use this whole emerging like the digital technology and so on to our advantage. And I think we should, uh, as long as we don't spend too much like physical as an energy in running all those servers and so on. So that's one thing to think about as well. As long as we don't add too much into the climate, already existing climate issues.
Absolutely. No, that's a good point. And it's interesting. So it tallies with a question we've had here about the data analytics point you made earlier on as well. So we've got these two different skill sets, I suppose. One is the how do you get the AI to do the scenario mapping, whatever it is, the functional element. And then we've also got this data framing question, which is how do you frame data in a useful way? And I suppose analytics is the step that takes you into that question about data framing, which is before you frame the issue, you need to understand what information is available to you. So I wonder, it's a little bit away from the specifics of your role now, maybe, but it's tied up in that skills question. Do you have any perspective on the future of data and the way we might use data and sustainability beyond what you've already said? Is that the question that we've had through?
Say it again. Sorry, I just need to think it through.
Sure. So I think the question that they're asking is, what do you think? How do you think data might be used in the future in sustainability? How might we use How might we use data for jobs in sustainability?
Okay. It's fundamental. Because again, I'm linking back to actions before we decide or we want to think about what actions we could do or we want to take. We need to understand what's happening on ground, what's happening with the workings of an organization or the workings of I don't know, manufacturing sector or so on and so forth. So data is quite key, but what data do we collect is very important. And that is where it very well in the sustainability space again, we have to always link it up with, as I said, there are a plethora of frameworks available, so many tools already very well developed. For example, IFC standards as well as this ESRS and so on. So there's so many, and they're all of them most of them talk about value chain as well. So it's important to absorb that. And then think through, right? So in order to deliver or even think about what actions should come through, what is the sort of data that we should be looking at, for how long we should be collecting the data, or if we collect data from, let's say, 500 or 2000 data points or sites, which ones should be focusing on. So a bit of that think through even before we embark upon collecting data. So you kind of have that whole workflow, that whole framework in front of you. And then you can adjust as you go along, as you get the data, as you get the scenarios responses through. So I hope that how answers this question, or kind of at least answers, but please have a follow-up question if that did not.
I think that's a good answer, Kripa. And we're coming towards the end now, so I'm going to ask you one last question. It's a bit more of a theoretical one, though. So don't worry if you don't have too much of an insight to share. But I mean, it's like you said, it's a very interesting time to be working in sustainability because it's bound up in all of these big crises, and like you said, perhaps even a poly crisis. But as our society begins to resolve and address these environmental challenges, what do you think the future of sustainability consultants could look like in 50 or more years, once we're past those big dates when we need to have addressed some of these challenges by at least somewhat? Do you think there's a future for sustainability beyond environmental crisis?
Yes, because there might be new things that we'll encounter, right? And also it's not just about providing a solution to an existing problem, because that's basic, right? You patch up, and then how you evolve or how you thrive as a society, as humans, and there's surely a space for that as well. So but at the moment we're probably only talking about conserving or protecting, right? Let's just say biodiversity for that matter, but there's always that next step where you I think that's the whole thing is so there's a theory around if you did have the time, there's something around weak sustainability and strong sustainability, right? Where the space where we're sitting is weak sustainability. So in short, yes, there is that chance because we're probably at this end of the spectrum, like the starting of the weak sustainability, and the aim should be to go towards strong sustainability. And all of us will have that job to do. Well, not me in 50 years, but there's a job to do.
Perfect. Thank you. I have a very strong message to end on there, and I absolutely agree. Well, thank you once again, Kripa, for presenting what was an excellent overview of the sustainability space, how it's changed, and how we might hope that it changes in the future. Really strong insight, I think, into not just the job itself, but also the skills, the frameworks, and even the principles underpinning that work. That's it from us for today, attendees. Thank you for logging in. I hope you found that beneficial and informative. Don't forget to record your attendance at this webinar in your IES CPD tool, which of course you can find by logging into the members area. The webinar has been recorded and it will be made available on the IES website and YouTube channel. If you are watching the recording on YouTube in the future, please do subscribe to our channel, like the video, and hit the bell to gain notifications of new content. Coming up soon, we have many more events which may be of interest. Most importantly, this webinar series will be continuing over the next week or so as we look at the changing nature of work in the water and land specialisms. So for water, we'll be joined by Monica Rivas Casado on 25th of September. That's a week today. And then on the 27th of September, next Wednesday, we'll be joined by Jonathan Atkinson to talk about the land sector. On Thursday, the 28th of September, we'll be bringing together these discussions about individual specialisms with a panel discussion on interdisciplinarity, digging into those big conversations which are at the heart of everything that we do as environmental scientists. And then to wrap up next week, on Friday the 29th, we have our next big horizon scanning discussion event where all of you can join the conversation directly and share your voices on both the future of the workforce and the future of environmental jobs themselves. You can sign up for all of those events right now on the IES website, where you'll also find details of our upcoming training workshops and some of our other events. If you're interested in our future of ES23 horizon scanning work, you can find all of the details on our website, or you can send us an email directly if you want to get involved. For now, thank you again to Kripa for an excellent webinar, and thank you to everybody else for attending and taking part. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you, Joseph. Bye. Bye all.